Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new here. I've been requested recently by Fringes and Tarot on Instagram to talk about the Fountain Tarot. This is a deck I've had for a really long time, since I think it came back when it came out. I kind of got it around, not immediately, but I got it that year I think that it came out, so what, like 2014 or something? But I've never done a review. I've spoken about it. Isn't that pretty? A rainbow. I've spoken about it, and I know it's shown up in some of my favorites videos and things, but I've never done a review. And I don't know that this is going to be a super thorough review, but I thought this might be an interesting one to put into my revisiting series, where I kind of take a look back at decks that, you know, have been old favorites and I haven't spoken about in a little while. So that is the Fountain Tarot. And this, I have the indie version. It's since been published, or mass produced, and I don't have that version to, you know, talk about the cardstock and everything, but from what I hear, it's done pretty well. Like, it hasn't been a super cheap copy. The cards are lovely and everything like that, and I know there are comparisons online. But today I'm going to be talking about what I love about this deck, how I use it, my general thoughts and feelings about it, and how my relationship has changed with it, that sort of stuff. So the indie version is just lovely. I don't know if this is showing up really well, but like the reflective rainbow stuff that we got going on. And this is one of my favorite backings of all time. I don't know, I think it's just the colors. I loved it when I first saw it, and I still really love it. So I've always just loved the production value of this deck. The cardstock is super matte and just gorgeous. These super really cool, almost glittery silver gilding. The box, the little white book, everything about this deck has just been done really well, and the cards are just gorgeous. I even love the size of it. Like, it's just a more traditional size card that's really easy to shuffle. It's just been a delight to work with and handle. I think the production value on this was just incredible from the get-go. We were really quite spoiled with this one. So as far as how I experienced this deck, the best word I can think of to describe it is neutral. It feels really, really neutral. Another thing, I always feel like it's very cool, calm, collected. It's beautiful, and I think the way the colors have been done just allows this really fresh, cool sort of voice to come through. It's very, very Rider-Waite-Smith in terms of the perspective it's taken. There are some differences in the cards, like it's not a Rider-Waite-Smith clone by any means, but it is a Rider-Waite deck, and I think it's a great alternative to the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Whether you just don't like the Rider-Waite-Smith and you want to learn with something different, or you just want, you know, your second or third deck, this would be a great one. Or if you just love the Rider-Waite-Smith and like slightly new perspectives on it, this deck's amazing too. Like, I just really, really like this deck. As far as us revisiting it, I don't use it as much as I used to, but I also have a lot more decks than I used to have. And I think I do tend to, these days, prefer a deck that has a lot of personality, that kind of, you know, I get buzzy conversational readings from, that feels a bit sassy or playful or cheeky. Like, I love those decks that just give me really snappy readings that I have a lot of fun with. I love those decks, and those tend to be my favorite decks. And quite honestly, the Fountain is not that tarot deck for me. It's a lot more subdued. I still get clear messages from it. Clear is another word that I would really, you know, I think sums up this deck quite well. I still get very clear messages from it. It's not like it's a quiet deck that I can't read. I get very clear messages from it, but it doesn't feel like it has a really distinct personality, like a character to it. I don't experience it that way at all. However, it's still a deck I really value and I like to have in my collection, because I think it offers something that a lot of my other decks don't. I think because I love those playful, fun, cheeky, quirky decks, I love those decks with a talkative, fun energy. This is a really good deck to have for those occasions when that's not what I want or need. I found this deck to be very good at de-escalating a situation, I suppose is the best way of putting it, to kind of bringing those really hot, high emotions down when something's quite serious and we need to tackle something, you know, that just is a bit touch and go, that maybe requires a more, you know, level, sort of calm approach to it. I would also say that this deck feels very objective. It feels like when you read it, it's just presenting things as they are. There's no kind of fluff or even interpretation put on a situation. It feels like it's just observing fact, you know, and it's not placing any judgment, positive or negative, on something. It just feels like it's like, well, this is just how it is. It doesn't feel like it's being sassy and calling you out. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, throwing something in your face. It just feels like someone who's just explaining the situation with, you know, with no flowery fancy words. It's just like, this is how it is. This is just the fact. That's how it reads to me. Which, even though it might be less fun, I think is a really, really valuable perspective and voice to have in my tarot deck collection, especially because I don't have a lot of those sort of decks. So when I need that, this is the first deck I go to. I would also say that this deck has been a great palette cleanser for me. I find that when I'm getting a bit frustrated or over tarot, or something's just not quite working for me, or I feel like I'm not quite connecting with my decks in the way I want to, my readings just aren't working, you know, I'm feeling a bit stuck, I'm feeling a bit bogged down or in a bit of a rut, I often find that the fountain, it's that palette cleanser of just something that's refreshing and simple and, you know, not too all over the place, that I can just kind of get back to basics with and just have something clear and fresh and breezy and simple. That's how I experience this deck. And so those are kind of the ways I'll use it. I'll use it when the situation is intense and hot and heavy and possibly quite difficult and problematic, and I just need something real chill and calm and neutral. Or I'll use it when I'm just kind of like over tarot and I'm frustrated and I'm just like, I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm just feeling a bit all over the place with my tarot reading in general. Sometimes I'll just go to this deck and just pull 3 cards and just chill out and have a very simple, easy kind of a read that's just clear and direct and objective. I find that this deck is great for both of those things, and that's why, even though it's not really necessarily a Katey deck, it's stayed in my collection. Even though I don't use it all the time, even though it's one of my not less used decks, but I don't use it as much as some of my others, I still keep it in my collection because it serves 2 very important and very specific roles that none or very few of my other decks serve. Plus, I will say that it's just really bloody beautiful. This artwork is just gorgeous. I especially love the greens in this deck. I think they're beautiful. I will say though, that I've seen the original images, like the original paintings, and they are incredible. Am I showing the same cards again? I just shuffled them. They are incredible. And part of me has often wanted like a second edition of this deck with the original images, the original saturation, because the cards that we have, the brightness has like gone up tenfold. The saturation is it's a lot lighter, which I think it's great because it gives it this light, I don't know, I feel like a minimalistic room with lots of sunlight coming in, like it gives it that sort of vibe. But also when I saw those original images, they were stunning, and there's something extra striking about them. And so I would love to have a Fountain Tarot, like, you know, second edition, that is more close to the actual saturation of the cards. Because I think they're beautiful, but I do also wonder how different it would feel as a deck and the way that it reads. Perhaps it wouldn't feel different at all, but I suspect it would have a slightly different feel to it. It's cool that the people in this deck are based on actual people, like these were modeled, painted from actual models, people, which is cool. It gives it a realistic sort of a feel. These people don't feel like characters, they feel like we're sitting with some actual real people, because in a sense we are. However, I do feel like this deck kind of came at the beginning of the really big upswell in calls for increased diversity. And there is a few examples of people of color represented. There's a fairly decent, you know, gender split, although it's still binary gender. Like you can see that there was a level of intention put towards not just having a white male deck. However, I do wonder if this deck was created today, we would get an even bigger, even broader sense of experiences and diversity. We wouldn't describe this as a celebration of, you know, a very, very broad, diverse example of human experience. There's certainly really only one body type represented. Not really a big variation in age. Certainly no illustrations of visible disability or anything like that, and minimal representations of people of color. This deck does also come with an additional card. It's called the Fountain, which I was showing you upside down. It's stunning. And I suppose that's one thing I can comment on. I don't think I really used this card for very long. I know some people like to have this card in the deck as the additional card, as it's supposed to be, and we do actually get a meaning for it in the book. But I just found it didn't really serve a purpose for me. So as beautiful as it is, and I really like the idea of it, I don't have it shuffled into my deck. I just use it as a regular 78 card deck. It's a really interesting deck in that we have a lot of like these angles and lights and lines, which I think is really beautiful. There's a lot of, you know, beams of light or bursts of light, a lot of lines of color like this, which I think is really unique in tarot. I don't have a tarot deck that looks like this. Another strength of the Fountain Tarot, in my opinion, is the little white book. It's a glorified little white book. It has, you know, it's not the 8 pages folded with a staple kind of little white book we come to expect in mass market decks. But it is still, it's not like a full guide book. However, I do think every single word in this book has been chosen with great intention and to great effect. It's very concise. Each card gets a page, not a lot of information, but the information we do get, I think, is great. It's a really helpful little white book if you're learning. I think you could do pretty well just with this little white book. You get a really good sense of what these cards are about. There's enough information to give you a really well-rounded reading, but not so much that you can't then jump off on your own, like that you're really stuck in 3 pages of information. But also if you're just kind of getting used to this deck and you want a different perspective or something, it's a great little white book for that too. In fact, let's draw a card and I'll read you out one of the messages in the book. It's seriously like butter shuffling this deck. It's amazing. Oh, we have the 5 of Swords. I love this, how precarious that is. For each card we get like a little title at the top, and this one is Tainted Victory. In the 5 of Swords, 2 glum figures stand in the background, defeated in inverted commas, while the victor, in inverted commas, balances tenuously on his spoils. The smirk on his face reveals a prideful lack of humility, while the distance between him and the others highlights the alienation he has created by winning, in inverted commas. Victories get polluted when your personal integrity is compromised. Nobody actually wins in this scenario, and the backlash can be horrible. Make sure you are paying attention to the whole picture, broaden your vision and honor your principles. It will pay off in the long run. And then we get a meaning, which is just a list of a few keywords. We have a tenuous victory, short-sightedness, profit at others' expense, manipulation, dishonorable behavior, humiliation, bullying. And then we have a few keywords for the reversed meaning. Cunning, ambiguity, meaningless achievement, weakness. So as you can see, like there's plenty of info there, and it gives you a really good introduction to the card, a really good summary. You could do a really good reading with just that information, but it certainly leaves you enough scope to go off on your own, especially with these keywords, kind of giving relevant keywords to the larger meaning explanation, but still kind of giving certain perspectives that you can use depending on the situation, depending on the spread. And as we can see from that meaning, it certainly doesn't shy away from the harder stuff. Even though this looks like a really light, I picked the darkest card. Even though this looks like a really light, pretty deck, which it is, the cards certainly deal with some of the harder stuff. And there are plenty of these darker images that don't shy away from those harder messages. We certainly get a very balanced, neutral perspective across the whole deck. So that is me revisiting the Fountain Tarot, an old favorite deck. I hope this has given you a bit of info, the Fringes End Tarot. It sounded like you were deciding whether to get the deck or not. So I suppose this is a little bit of a review, but it's also me kind of reflecting on how I've used this deck, and I have used it for 4 or 5 years now, and it's still a really valued part of my collection. So let me know in the comments if there's any other decks that I've had for a long time that you'd like me to revisit. I think I might do the Osho Zen sometime soon, or maybe the Anna K. I've had both of those decks for a really long time. So I hope you enjoyed this video and enjoyed having a look at the wonderful Fountain Tarot, and I will talk to you next time. So much love. Bye.